Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about technical jargon. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, Frederick, are software engineers known to use overly technical jargon te and telling others what is and what is not possible, and even getting defensive when someone questions their approach? Well, not I I, I don't know. I'm not sure I would say that they are known for it. It depends on which region they are in. I'll give you something that is. It might sound bad, guys, and I'm very sorry. Maybe it was just a bad experience on my part, but this thing is either very true, but then it's only true in some countries, and it's definitely true for some people. But I'm not in any way saying that it's not happening all across the world with certain people, but I saw the times I've been visiting some countries who have a very hierarchy type of class system in their society, in their companies and their society. This is more of an issue. There's areas of the world where arrogance is very high up on the. It's almost a byword for you are successful, therefore you can sort of behave a little bit worse than I would like. But for the most part, I wouldn't say that I've seen this being an intentional problem, at the very least. The reason why I say that it's not an intentional problem is because the reality is that most software developers who use a lot of technical jargon, at least from what I can see, they're not usually trying to confuse people. It's just that this is normal speech for them. That is how they speak. And to be very frank with you, I have had many conversations with a lot of people in many different areas where, people learn something that might be an expert field, doesn't matter what it is, and they use the words that they commonly refer to in their job, and they might forget sometimes that they're not talking to someone who knows what that means. So it's similar to how if you listen to academics speak, their way of expressing themselves is usually a lot more refined than someone who doesn't read all that much or might have a fairly, doesn't have a very high education or a history in academia, as an example. Because you get influenced by it. I've seen this. I mean, it's happened to me as well, of course. I think it happens to a lot of people. So I don't think that it's ill-intended all the time. But absolutely, there are some people who are arrogant in our field, like software developers who have big egos and use a lot of technical stuff, technical jargon, and speak down to people and so forth. Luckily for me, I don't meet them all that much, but when I do meet them, I've grown to the point where it doesn't really bother me so much that they behave that way, because it's always is surprisingly easy to get such a person. If the reality is that I usually don't look at this sort of behavior as something that I feel like we need to deal with, unless they have this sort of behavior and they're blocking progress for other people or they're causing issues. I mean, if it's just them and they're sort of behaving in a arrogant way or using a lot of technical jargon, it is not really quote unquote hurting anybody, I'm fine with it. But if it's something where I feel like I need to act, I usually have a trick that you can use but it requires you to also know your shit pretty well. It's one of my favorite references to this is White Guys Can't Jump or something like that, where one of the teachings Wesley Snipes learns in that movie is that a person who seems humble can be fairly good at basketball, and a person who's very arrogant, people love seeing that guy go down. And that's very dangerous when you're dealing with someone who might seem very humble but can make that sort of thing happen. That's exactly how I suggest that you deal with people like this. Get really good at what you do, know your shit really, really well, because usually people who do use a lot of technical jargon and so forth, they're usually doing that more because, as I said, it's an ego thing, and it usually is that they have an audience of non-experts. You can look at your politicians for reference if you want. And if you ever put them in a conversation with someone who is an expert, who's really good at this stuff, it's pretty interesting to see how fast that person can steamroll. But I like to do the Socrates thing instead, which basically is feign ignorance and ask very humble, stupid questions, and let them really listen to them. Try to really hear them out and try to explore their entire argument until everything is laid bare. They have nothing more to add. This can take a while, because if they're very full of themselves, they will go on and on and on and on, and then you don't say anything. You don't just jump. Don't be like on their case as soon as they say something that you can contradict. Wait for them to go firmly into your argument trap, and then flip the whole thing on them, because now they have given away everything. And then if you can communicate effectively, you can basically kill all their jargon. And if you're really good at this stuff, you can actually rephrase what they said with technical, very complicated terms, see the hole in their arguments, and put the whole thing in terms that normal people can understand. And all of a sudden, they lose all of this bluster and like so forth, and they usually get very defensive in many cases when this happens. I've seen this a few times. The thing is, what's so beautiful about this is basic argument, basic debating technique. When you get to them, and people can see that you got to them, it's almost a primal thing, they lose the entire room usually. It is the most severest emotional blow that you can make to someone, and it shows to everybody in the room. It's very difficult to come back from that when you've basically been schooled by someone and you have already given away all, like there's no room for interpretation, and that's why you don't jump on them as soon as they say something that is wrong, because that gives them deniability. But if you really listen them out and they have everything out in the open, and they're wrong, they cannot twist that in any possible way. And yes, some people do get very defensive about this, and that's why I argue to people that be competent and be humble, because when you are truly secure in yourself and you really know your shit, why do you care to prove yourself to anybody else? It's food for thought. So what I want you to take away from this is that when people use technical jargon as software developers, it's usually, as I said, I don't think it's not that often that I see people do it out of malicious intent or pride or ego or something like that. It's just that you sort of get used to talking about technical things and technical terms, so you forget that you're maybe talking to a room where maybe one or two people. And this happens all the time. Practically every stand-up there is something like that, where we have a cross-functional team. Some people are from different departments and so forth, and the developers start talking about their story, and all of a sudden we're talking about loops and unit tests and stuff like that, and most people don't even know what we're talking about, right? And it's not because we're bad people, it's not because anybody's trying to make someone feel like, oh, we're so smart. It's because we don't think that, we're not trying to make everybody included here, because it's a technical thing, but we still have to be able to communicate. Sometimes it goes overboard, but it's usually a very innocent thing. And as for the people who do feel very threatened when you question their approach and so forth, absolutely, I see this all the time. There is a hint of a glee in a lot of people's eyes. I see it often, even sometimes among my own coworkers, where if you make a mistake or you make an argument that is untrue or you something like that, some people really want you, because they feel like they got you, because they feel good. Which is it is also a human thing. They feel good when they can see that you made a mistake, and they want to stick it to you. Trust me, this gets even worse when if you're on average pretty good at what you do. This is, as I said, the more humble you can make yourself, the less of this you're going to see. But if you build yourself up too much, all of a sudden you're going to have to defend that ego, and people love to see a arrogant prick go down. They really do. And so my tip to you is, if you deal with people like that, killing them off and like shaming them in front of a lot of people is as easy as actually being a very nice, genuine person, really trying to listen to them and let them make their entire statement. Don't correct them until they're completely done, and then go in for the kill. It becomes very difficult to defend yourself when you've said your piece fully and there's no deniability any longer. And then if you're dealing with someone who has a bit of communication skill, that basically flips your entire argument and makes everybody sort of understand that there's a pretty big problem with the way that you have presented things. Can get very defensive, but it doesn't look good. Have a great day.